So in years prior, I used this much smaller ball, but today I found one of these larger ones for $2.50, and these work great. So I know a lot of issues or a lot of concerns. Right off the bat, we'll cover them. These actually last a pretty long time. So what I recommend doing is once we add the fabric, keeping the hole towards the surface, or at least remembering where it is to fill it up. The one that I have is still holding up strong 3 years later, so they do last a really long time. So today we're going to be using this vinyl tablecloth. So I picked this up from Walmart. The reason for it is that the typical fabric is not going to cover it in one quick pass. Those are much smaller, but I saw these and it's much longer. It's about 6 feet across, and by being vinyl or plastic material, this will hold up to the UV rays outside and the inclement weather really nicely. So we're just going to take this, open it up, and whatever's left over, we can always put to use. So I'm a zero waste type of guy, so whatever is left over, we can use underneath our planters to keep the moisture away. We could also create a wreath out of it. There's so many different possibilities. So we're just going to gather up our fabric. Keep the ball in the middle, that way it covers the ball in its entirety. And make sure you leave a little bit of excess, because the top portion is where we're going to secure our blooms. And we want to make sure that we have enough fabric to be able to create a knot up top and secure our hanger. So this looks like enough fabric for me, so what we're going to do is just cut it off right about here. So to cut the vinyl or plastic, I'm just going to take our scissors and cut it off. So this excess can actually be used to cut a smaller amount and turn those other smaller balls into a hanging ornament, which was the standard size that I used to create. So what I think is really cool about this technique and this design is that you can apply so many different techniques and color schemes and holidays and seasons to this ball. You can turn this into a pumpkin, you can turn it into a light bulb, so many different creative ways. So now you can take some ribbon. We do have ribbons and florals available at nicksseasonaldecor.com. We're going to cut a length of it, and this is going to be our means of securing it to a tree, to a lamppost, to an arbor. And this was the top question I got in the first video, so I just want to let you guys know that when it comes time to secure this to whatever we decide to hang it from, all I do is I just take the string or the ribbon and create a knot on the surface. So there's no complicated, special thing or tool that we do for that. I just take it and tie it to whatever surface I want it to be attached to. And that way, when it comes time to move it or store it away, you can just cut off the excess ribbon and then secure it next year. So we're going to come back to our ball with some zip ties now. Here we have a few zip ties. I'm actually going to string 2 zip ties together so that we have a long enough zip tie to make sure that it's secured. And what we're going to do is gather our fabric. So at this point in time, my main concern is just making sure that it's all secured within that zip tie. And then what we're going to do is we're going to tease all of this fabric out to make sure that it's nice and secured, and also that it's in the shape of the ball, because right now this is looking pretty wonky. So now that we have our little cluster of fabric secured, what we can do then is take our zip tie. And it makes it easier, like I said, with 2 of those pieces through it. And tie it off. Then you can just cut the excess fabric off, or the zip tie off. So we want really nice pleating on the ball, and that's what I figured out a few years ago. It really creates a nice effect. So to get that, all I've been doing is just pulling a little bit, piece by piece, of the top until we have that nice pleating. Does it have to be perfect? No, it does not. But it does look a little bit better when you have those nice long lines kind of streaming down the ball, and you want it to be round, right? So you don't want any, super bulky parts, and so far I'm liking the way this is looking. So to make it a little bit more manageable, we don't need all of this substance up top, so we're just going to snip all of that excess off. And if this was typical fabric, because this is vinyl, if this was just basic fabric, you can use these as little terry cloths to clean your home. But we're not going to need this much for the top of the ball. What we're going to do to secure our flowers is simply and solely use what we have at the top. So all of this little right here. So now what we got to do is take our ribbon. I'm just going to take it and place it right here. You could do 2 knots to secure it and create a little loop. But what I like to do is just take 1 string, make sure enough of that string is underneath. You're not going to see it anyway. and secure it once more with a zip tie. So that means that the fabric is secured twice to prevent it from falling apart. So the more security measures you can take, the better off you are. Cut off that zip tie, and then we have our ball. Now it's time to add some flowers, and I figured what better way to create a hanging ornament than using hanging wisteria. So I have the pink variety here, or the white variety. It does come in pink and purple as well. And we're just going to snip the flower heads right off. So all of this foliage we can use as well. If we decide to choose and place it on, we can just cut the individual leaves off and work them in. And that'll just bulk up the overall ball. So that is one bush worth. We're going to add our flowers before adding any greenery. So to add these flowers, one thing I'm going to try to do is to take the flowers, dip them in our glue skillet first of all. This is my favorite tool if you haven't seen it yet. And if you haven't seen it yet, welcome. You must be new here because I've been using it here on Hometalk for at least 4 years now. And like I was saying, I'm taking it and I'm placing it on the inside of this because the inside is like a felt cotton material, and that'll do a great job of holding these flowers in place. The vinyl would as well, but the inside of these works a little bit better. So we'll just take them and circulate around our orb. Another thing you can do too is cover this with yarn. So that would be a lot more time consuming, but it would create a really unique effect as well. So just continue dipping them. Make sure you use enough hot glue. Keep in mind at this time of year, even here in Massachusetts, it gets incredibly hot. And I know other parts of the country and the world it gets even hotter. So you got to make sure you use enough hot glue to keep it from melting off or falling off. Okay, so see what I'm doing here? I'm just swirling and making sure we get enough hot glue. So now we cut off the individual leaves, and what we can do then is just poke them right in to create a more 3D ball. And then when we come back in with even more flowers, it'll create kind of that roundy moundy effect, which we definitely want for this. So just work them throughout. So now that we have a nice little bed of greenery, we can work in more flowers. So I left the sticks a little bit longer on the tops of these. It's just a little bit easier and safer to hold when you're dipping in your glue skillet, but always remove those unsightly stems. It's the same principles as designing in the garden. You always want to cut right above a leaf node. So then we can take a few more of these wisteria stems, dip them in our glue, and I'm really wedging them between that zip tie, and they'll stay exactly where I place them if you wedge them deep enough. Come back in with another one on this side. And one more on the opposing side. And then they stay exactly where you put them. Now we have some of these beautiful pink roses, which match the fabric really nicely. We're going to take those and wedge them in again. So you can use whatever flowers you like. We decided to use wisteria and roses today, but any flowers would look pretty. It's basically whatever you have on hand. So if you're like me, I design oftentimes with things that I have on hand. That way I can, kind of declutter a little bit, because in the crafting world you get overwhelmed really quickly with, too many supplies. And it kind of saves you a buck or two by using what you got, and you're able to be a little bit more creative that way. So just taking these, working them throughout. So just dipping our third and final spray. Here's the larger of the blooms. And like I said, my placement is just kind of sporadic. I'm not the type to go for perfection like this, because I think if you create that rounded effect, no matter what, it's going to look great. So we're going to take one more bloom. We'll place it here. And you might have to just hold a bloom or two, or really wedge it in there to stay exactly where you want it. So that is 3 rose sprays. What we can do now is either work in more flowers, call it complete, or work in more greenery. And here is the finished ball. So I decided against adding any other flowers or greenery. I think it looks really pretty all on its own next to this beautiful lilac bush in front of my office. So this is the larger ball, like I said before. However, you can absolutely do this on a smaller bouncy ball that are only $1 at the dollar store. Or what I think would look pretty too is to have a larger one followed by a smaller one above, and so on and so forth. You can get a lot of use out of these in a lot of different seasons. You could do a pumpkin, like I said before. You can do this in the shape of an egg. You can do this in different colors for different seasons and holidays, and varied sizes for added texture. So thank you all so much for watching. This is Nick Kretikos of Nick's Seasonal Decor, and you're watching me on Home Talk. Bye, everyone.